All right, I get the little microphone, so this is going to kind of keep me static, and unless I'm going to like move over this way and move over this way, I'll probably have to stand still. So thanks everybody for sticking around for this. We're going to make this really interesting. For those of you who don't know, I'm the cruise director, meaning I am the social coordinator for everybody. Most of the people in the room know who I am. I'm the one who makes sure everyone gets invited, everyone has a good time, no one gets taken advantage of, and that we all contribute. I'm like Julie McCoy of the Love Boat, which is why I have the Love Boat logo. And I'm real excited to have a bunch of friends of mine on this panel here. And the perspective I'm going to go on it this year is we're going to have like a conversation, because I realize, Max and I are old friends, Felix and I are old friends. Those of us in the community, we talk a lot to each other in the CISO community here in town. And there's a lot of things that we talk about that nobody knows we talk about. And so, for instance, like AI and security, what do we think about that? We've been talking about that for 2 years, but not in front of an audience. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to have discussion about these topics we talk about, but not in front of an audience, because inquiring minds want to know, right? And I'm also going to do some callbacks to stuff that Tony said, some stuff that Max said, things that Felix and I have talked about a lot. And then Jennie, who's now my new best friend, we're going to get into, different things that different people are interested in. So you've seen all their pictures on all day long of who they are. I won't, you can look up who they are and their things. I don't want to take time that, because I really want to get into the conversation. And so the first thing I want to talk about is community. Community is what brings us together. Community is what, I always talk about the cybersecurity community is like a support group, right? It was like at some point in the night there was going to be crying and hugging, and usually I could be hugging Chris. But anyway, but there's going to be, because we need each other, because we can only really trust each other to be in the same incident. We're all in the same fight, no matter where we are. The great thing about Charlotte is we have everyone from Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Lowe's Home Improvement, all the way down to Krispy Kreme, National Gypsum, which I know is here, and everyone's probably asked you, again, Duke Energy, yes, sorry, Martin. I won't make the joke of like Fortune 100 only, but anyway, the National Gypsum, which I know there's a National Gypsum guy here. You've probably been asked all day. It's like, do you know Mike Brandon? Where I'm the cruise director, Mike is the mayor. So in community, I want to kind of ask each of you, because community also talks about information sharing. And it's something that Jennie and I talked about, because public-private partnership with the federal government is really important in understanding who's talking about what different things, because we're all in the same fight. And whether or not we have the resources of one of the big banks or we don't, and need the advice of our peer group to kind of give insight into what I really need to worry about, what's most important, what are you seeing, that is what the information sharing. Now we have the ISACs, and obviously financial services ISAC, retail. Craig, you're in retail. There's retail ISAC for Lowe's. We have energy, for CERC, and different ones, and Duke. And so, but I want to kind of go through first, A, do you agree with me that it's community is really important, and what does it really mean to you? And I'll start with Jennie.
I could have just talked loudly and everyone could have hopefully heard me either way.
Project.
Now that we are new best friends, yes. I will say I spend a lot of my time talking and coordinating with a lot of different groups. I think both from the federal side and also from my adjuncting gig that I do. I spend a lot of time talking about the importance of, building relationships, building networks, building rapport, right? What did you find out that I can, learn from? What did I find out that you can learn from? I think the importance of building those networks is something that can't be understated, knowing that we have an opportunity to have this kind of collaboration, coming together with like minds. I just moved down here a couple months ago, so this is my first foray into the networking community here in North Carolina, and I'm super excited. I think it's been really great. Everybody's been super welcoming. I appreciate everybody being so supportive and, having these types of opportunities, definitely leverage them. Not that I'm calling anybody out, but I saw lots of folks on their phones today scrolling mindlessly, right? Checking emails, working, right? This is an opportunity for everybody to step outside of your day-to-day and really immerse yourself in what's happening. So I highly encourage you to do that in the future. Try to be as present as possible, just so that you're getting the benefit out of this, right? That while you walk away, and we're now new best friends, and so if I have a question, I'm going to reach out to Max or to Felix or Tony or whoever it might be, and say, hey, let me pick your brain about this. This is something I'm struggling with. We were talking about, not that I'm calling out the federal government, but there's a specific organization, right, that's scanning all of our cloud platforms. It's driving up our usage costs. It's something that we're seeing across our environment, and being able to talk through strategies and different things that we can do is really valuable. So yes, I agree on that one. Won't agree
Great.
with you on
Okay.
all of them.
We'll disagree about things later.
Fine, yes.
All right, 2, 1. Does that work, Max? There we go. All right. So Felix, whomever wants to, this is open to whoever feels inspired.
Sure. I just want to say, wasn't the food good?
Yes.
I had 2 plates.
Got to get the protein in, right?
Yes,
Got to bulk
so
up.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you to FutureCon for setting this event up, because when I moved here 3 years ago, it was really hard. My team is remote. I was remote. I moved to a new city. I have no idea who I'm around, but coming to events like this is really what kept me sane. So I want us all to give a big round of applause to FutureCon for setting this event up. And then when I think about community, Max, you hit the nail right on the head. Putting your oxygen mask on first. Most of the time for us in security, we are totally meant to be, right behind our computer, focusing on every single thing, trying to get it to resolution, but not truly ourselves. So having a place like this, Rick, thank you. He has an email list which he sends out, I think, once or twice a month with every single event that's going on. And I tell you guys, those drinks have helped me a lot. Just being able to be in a room where you have other people that share the same cry, the same worries. I'm trying to get a new product. I have no idea who's used it before. Yes, the vendors are going to sell me on how good it is and how it can be the best new thing. But then being able to talk to someone who's actually used it makes a huge difference. So I know I've been talking for long, but I just want to say that's amazing. It's phenomenal. I agree with it. And for the most part, it has helped me be a better person. So thank you.
Beautiful.
Well, I'm going to add a different perspective here, because you're talking about this from an end user perspective, from an end company. So you would assume, if you look around this room, that all these vendors compete. What would shock you is actually going to a group like this, where all the vendors meet as researchers and have the same community. So actually, even though we all compete, we all have one common goal. And actually, if you put research teams in a room, that same community exists. So I'm just pointing out that it's not only on the end user side this community exists, it's across the whole cybersecurity industry. And actually, that's one of the things I think is really cool being part of this industry. And with that, we share, we might sell our threat intelligence to you, but if we see something, for example, that's critical infrastructure, we'll share it with CISO. Of course we will. I mean, that's part of community, isn't it? Is making sure that the right people are informed about the right things. So I just want to make the point, the community is extended beyond just you guys that are sitting down. It's extended within the vendor community as well.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Tony. That's a really good perspective, because, again, that's why we have community, is we get different perspectives. And make sure people in the back remember your conversations are flowing over here, so make it easier for us to be able to hear. Max, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think I would just add, one, you mentioned, a lot of us are hybrid. A lot of us just moved here. And this is a conversation I've had with, some of the younger staff I have, is I would venture to guess that many, if not most of us in this room, are in jobs or have gotten jobs because of our network. Mm-hmm. Because of people we often work alongside. Well, now we're hybrid, right? We've got a lot more remote. And so we have a new generation of workers coming in who are not going to have that advantage, right? Look, when I was 24, 25, like, oh yeah, remote's great, man, I can do my pajamas and whatever. It seems great. What they don't realize is the social capital we build that helps our teams stay together, and for them to find what their next role and opportunity is going to be. They're missing that. They're not getting that at work if they're hybrid or remote. So that's a challenge for all of us, and that's where some things like this is an opportunity for people at every level to come in and hear other perspectives, meet people, start to build those relationships and do that. So that's one thing I would point out I think is really valuable. And again, you notice how many of us have only been here in Charlotte 5 years, 3 years, couple months. Yeah. Right, but and I gotta say, after 20 years in DC, it is a complete change down here from what I've seen from when I first got here about just the cohesion, the community, people know each other and share information. That's incredibly valuable. And the only other little thing I'll add is a reminder when we talk about community and these things that real community has a cost, right? We live in a virtual time. Everybody's got friends on LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever else. And that's nice, and it lets you keep up with people, but that's not community. Because real community has a cost. And those costs vary, right? And maybe you got to be around some people you may not normally get along with. It may be that people ask or infringe on you and say, hey, I need some help. Can you do this for me? That's part of community. But I would encourage you have to make that investment. You have to know going in that community is going to have some cost. And you've got to be able to accept that and be part of it, right, to get the value out of community. So that's the two things I would add on.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks. And community is also about, like, the range. You have CISOs on here and CIOs, all the way down to practitioners. You talked to Oliver and Madeline earlier this morning at Fish Club, which is our practitioner level community, and it's about bringing people into the cybersecurity. So keeping on that thread, I'm going to talk about our pipeline and hiring, and what I call, Max referenced it, the great firewall of HR, which is a challenge we have on both sides. If you're on the Fish Club Discord, which there are over 500 people on it, and I highly recommend everyone get on it, you see a lot of people coming out of school struggling, sitting out hundreds of resumes, getting immediately rejected because AI is telling them that it doesn't match. So then what do? They use AI to make their resume match what the job description is, and they get passed. And then one of us interviews them. It's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And so both sides are frustrated by it, but that's where getting into community, and all of us has kind of mentioned, it's like, hey, did you talk to that woman before? It's like, let's go talk to her and get her in, because being out and about is important. So I want to ask, what are you seeing and what are you doing to kind of help in this great firewall of HR? Because I think that, Tony, you even brought that up about, it was Merlin who brought up one of the edicts about, is HR getting in the way? And I'm like, absolutely, because they change it when we put it in there, because they need to be this high to ride the ride kind of thing. But what are some things that you're doing to help get past that great firewall to be able to get the best people? Because last thing I'll say is, we've done a disservice in our industry of making it intimidating for people to come in. Because if those of you have seen my neurodiversity talk, it's like, I don't care where you came from. I want to know how you think and what your personality and what your work ethic is. And you could be working the fry shift at McDonald's, and if you have the right mindset, I'll happily take you in the sock. And so, but HR has a certain must be this high to ride, even worse in the federal government. Actually, I'll start with you, Jennie, because you have it worse in federal government. I'm sorry. Unless you want Felix to start, he can go.
I'll be happy to start. No, so I have two sides to this coin. So the federal government obviously is notoriously hard to get into. And what's happening, like you said, HR kind of sets the standards as to whose resumes actually get in front of my face, right? And so I'll be reading through them, and I get resumes with all kinds of experience that have nothing related to what I actually need. And so it spends a lot of time, sorting through and trying to find somebody who's a good fit. And a lot of times we'll get folks that are really green, or we get folks that are really seasoned and want way more money than the federal government is ever going to pay them. And they deserve it, and if that's what you want, this is not the spot for you. And so one of the things that I do kind of on the flip side of that to try to combat that, I'm still, working through the HR struggle, but I also teach, and I get a lot of folks coming through the program, they're master's level students, and so these are people with a lot of experience a lot of times, and they're just now coming back to school. Or I get folks that are just now realizing they want a career change, or somebody who's kind of green. And I spend so much time and effort with the students because I want to give them opportunities, and I, offer them and say, look, I'll help you with your resumes. I'll help you find which certifications are going to work for you. Right? Trying to give them avenues and pathways, and I say, reach out to me on LinkedIn, right? Keep in touch. I want to see you be successful. If there's an opportunity that comes up that I think is going to match what you're looking for, I'm happy to pass that on to you. And so I think from my perspective, I'm trying to start at the front of the pipeline to try to combat some of that. But yeah, you're definitely right. HR is definitely a struggle. That's something I think trying to navigate is really hard depending on the environment that you're in. But definitely spending the time, the referrals are really helpful, right? Like if I have somebody that I know is a good fit for a job, I will shamelessly promote them. I'm like, you want this person on your team, right? Like they're gonna do a great job for you. If I'm gonna stick my neck out for you, you better be a superstar, right? And so like I'm not gonna do that very often, but if you're a great one, like I wanna help you be successful. And I think for me, that's one of the ways that like trying to figure out a way to navigate the process, is kind of circumventing HR to get folks in that we know are good people.
Yeah, no, that's great. And a reminder, if you're going to have conversations, please go outside because it travels and makes it hard for the people in the back to hear. Whoever else wants to feel compelled to talk?
I could go on for hours about the federal. I will.
Yeah, we have an event coming up on October 1st that this is going to be the topic, so you'll see that in an email next month.
We'll need some bourbon for that. So the only thing I'll add, I've actually, I've got a small cybersecurity team in my company. We're an old line manufacturer. I've actually been fortunate because we're manufacturing with an engineering sort of background, they still have, this used to be a more common model of co-ops, right? People who are actively in school coming in to do real work, right? Not internship, right? They don't pay a lot, but it's a paid co-op, and they come in and are expected to do real work. We've been fortunate. I mean, one of my all-stars at my sort of junior level was, a multi-year co-op. And the next hire I have is also someone we identified as co-op. We were, but we were fortunate because that's just how our company ran, because they always had engineers, and that's historically engineering companies have had that sort of model. And you'll hear people talk about apprenticeship and things like that. I absolutely think that we've got to look and push for those kind of models to bring people in, right? I would much rather somebody come in for 6 months with no real cyber background, but with soft skills and capability and show them what to do, versus them go into like, oh great, they went out and got, a certification. Certs aren't bad, but with no experience, they're just not that helpful. I'd much rather see what they do, and so I do think to the degree we can find ways to do more of those models, that's a great way to get people in and really help sort of kickstart their careers. And they may figure out it's not for them, but they're still going to get good experience. So that's one.
And that helps with the diversity. And so both what Jennie said and you said is like finding people in. And, one of your friends in the community said he's kind of a compulsive interviewer. He's talking to wait staff. It's like, you have the personality. Have you thought about going into this? And, this kind of thing, because we can't train personality, but we can train on the technology and the process. Felix.
So I'll take a different approach with Tony on this. Yes, I've done that. I realized earlier on in my career that HR is actually my best friend. So I would sit with HR, go through how they find people on LinkedIn, who we are looking for. It's all been good. My organization actually has a program where we bring students from college. As a matter of fact, 3 of my hires all came from that program, where they go through a rotational system and then they learn everything that we are doing in different parts of the organization. That's all good. However, the challenge is, where is the diversity once they actually get in? Where does the growth occur once they get in? How many people come in as analysts, become engineers, and are able to become senior managers and directors, and eventually become CISOs? That's my biggest challenge, because I think we've done a great job bringing people into security. We've been talking about this for the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's the biggest thing that we talk about. But how many of them are growing to that C level? So if anyone has anything that you are doing that can help, please go ahead. That's my challenge.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, the military doesn't hire generals off the street. and yet all the CISOs come from outside. And it would be happy if we were able to kind of build them up in. And so Tony, do you have anything to say on that one?
Well, the only thing I'd add is as a vendor, we actually run scholarship programs for exactly the diversity issue. So we offer $5,000 to several people a year who are on cybersecurity courses. So if you're actually in companies that have a CSR program, you could be suggesting the same type of thing if you want greater diversity and more people going through cybersecurity courses. So I'm just saying, go and talk to your CSR teams as well and actually promote this as a general issue. I think the latest statistic in the US is there's 700,000 people short in the cybersecurity industry. Now, of course, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, is it good or bad? I mean, most people would say it's bad. It's why you get paid so much. Yeah? So it could be.
Yeah, a supply and demand thing. But I would maintain that we're looking in the wrong places and we're asking for the wrong things. It's not because they don't exist. They exist, but they don't know that they're qualified and they've been too intimidated and don't have the opportunity to get in, which is kind of like what we're talking about. And I appreciate the discussion about like bringing up. Jermaine, you had asked the question to Max about like, hey, if I want to be a CISO, what do I need to worry about? I've seen Joe Sullivan from Uber like having courses and Tim Brown from SolarWinds having these things like what kind of protection? And I think, this is something that Max and I have talked about for years. And I remember last year when Tim Brown had the thing, we were talking about like how you read it. He goes, as an attorney, I read the thing and I think he didn't flip and that's why they're going after him. But also when we were on the panel 2 years ago at ISG Squared, we talked about this because we were talking about Joe Sullivan and we're like, I would not have made that decision for the thing that he answered, which was the important one, is like, stick to your boundaries. It's like, I'm not going to do something off the boundaries. And you were very accurate in saying that it kind of goes into. But, I don't know, just for the rest of the audience, and like I said, this is something that we talk about all the time, but you don't have the benefit of people who are not in our community of hearing. When you mentioned D&O insurance, directors and officers insurance, and that it would be for like the CEO, the CFO, and people who get sued all the time for being officers of the company. But what people don't realize, and it was Tim Brown that kind of highlighted this when they were asking, how much do you need? 3 million, 5 million? It's like, he doesn't get all of it. He's sharing it with the CEO and CFO and all those other things. And certain companies may have the CEO gets 50% and you may get like $800,000 of it just because you're at the bottom of the food chain. But the two other things, and I'll step and the people who are, let Max and others talk about this, is in this package, it's an employment contract that has all of the requirements and all of the things you talked about, like if anything goes wrong, here's my library, and then liability clauses that supersede your tenure, that go for 5 years or 10 years after. So if they want to come back and say, hey, this happened when you were in charge and you were off at pasture doing your things, raising your alpacas, and they're going to try to come back because you did that. So I will kind of like preface that the answer is like it's a cocktail of things and it will differ based on the company, the regulatory, the size, the industry, multinational, not multinational. But just to kind of like dig a little more into that than answering the question, and I'll pass it off to those who want to follow up.
Well, the only thing I'll add, and that again we talked about, right? The SEC reporting, the new reporting to CISA for critical infrastructure, right, on top of anything you already have in a publicly traded company, those are adding new liability. And so you need to be very thoughtful. If you are in the chain, right, that contributes, and if you don't know these terms, you need to, right, the 8K, the 10K filings, which publicly traded companies have to do, if you are in that sort of chain of writing or decision-making on those, you need to understand you do have an exposure. I was talking to a very close friend last year who was leaving a role as a chief, this person was a chief accounting officer at a publicly traded company. And we were talking through all of this because I got it from, unfortunately, the other side in DC, because I watched, just mainline tech staffers who were literally paying off hundreds of, someone paying off $100,000 of debt they owed to lawyers because they got dragged up in front of Congress. They didn't do anything. They weren't appointees. They were the person, and when Congress goes after you because hey, why did this get deleted? You get dragged up to Congress, and you do not ever want to go in an adversarial, under oath testimony without a good, qualified lawyer beside you when it comes to things like that, right? Or to go sit down with the SEC or anybody else. And again, that's why I say we're just at the front edge of that, but it's going to grow, it's going to keep happening, and it's going to go the next level down below CISOs. That's what scares me.
Right.
I think about some poor cyber researcher getting pulled into something like that.
Or the head of the SOC team.
Yeah, I mean, and which is outrageous, frankly, but it's going to happen. People, you know, for all sorts of reasons, don't necessarily care about the damage they do if they're trying to make a point or win a lawsuit. And so it's just, that's something we want everybody to be aware of and start to think of when you're trying to do that and protect yourself.
Yep.
So I think just from a different perspective, this is something that like I have thought about and people have asked me about over the course of my career is, you know, when you're in a lower level position, right? What's the brass ring? Where are you trying to go, right? Do you want to be a CISO? Do you want to be a CIO? But nobody really thinks through what that entails, right? The level of responsibility, right? You're the one that's accountable. I don't care that whatever, you know, junior person did something, right? They were malicious. They, you know, accidentally did something. It doesn't matter, right? It's my name that's on the paperwork. I'm the one in the seat. It's my responsibility. And being able to protect your team is really important. And part of that is really knowing your people. And I think from my leadership side and the background there, that's something that I put a lot of focus into. And same thing, mentoring, right? I have a lot of junior folks on my team, and I really want to spend time with them because I'm like, look, if you're not going to be comfortable being the one that's getting grilled, if you're not going to be the one comfortable going up and having to talk to whatever, you know, other leadership and explaining what happened, if you're going to be in the hot seat, right, you need to be able to handle that kind of pressure. And that's not for everyone. And that's okay, right? Like that's not, everybody doesn't need to be in this role. And if that is your ambition, those are things that you really need to spend time, make sure that you're comfortable with, that you're able to go in and articulate and be responsible and be the one that's going to take that accountability and really, you know, protecting your team. Because ultimately, like I boil that back down, like my job here is to make sure that you can do your job, right? I'm here to protect you. I will take the fall, whatever it is, you know, knowing that you're in that role, that's part of your responsibilities.
Yep. We're good? Okay. So speaking of liability, I'm going to come to you, Tony. In your talk today, you talked about cyber insurance and cyber insurance as being an indicator of risk. Like 4 years ago, you know, all of a sudden the cyber insurance companies were just getting their lunch handed to them because they were paying out lots of, you know, the cyber insurance companies were paying out a lot. And so they started getting, because when I was a CISO 10 years ago, my cyber insurance thing was 2 pages because no one wanted to be too complicated because they'll just go to another carrier to ask too many questions. And then they're like, nope, 2020, they're like, forget it. I'm going to just completely grill you. And we, as the community, started sharing what questionnaires we got. And we saw it's like, oh, one asked a lot about immutable backups, and the other asked a lot about how you're managing service accounts, and one's asking how you're managing privilege accounts, because it's what's really they're paying out on is what's important to them. Which goes to your point about like, hey, what are the things that really caused risk? So, what are your, you know, it's like so I'll be curious on like your side of the house of like how you see that, because I know that there are certain things that carriers would say, do you have certain tools? Do you have retainers with certain kind of incident response people or ransomware or, you know, or negotiators and stuff like that? What do you see from your side?
Well, that's just the wrong term, isn't it? How can you be a negotiator with an extortionist?
They're very effective.
Yeah,
Mostly they're stalling.
So did you get that? I'm just saying, how can you be a negotiator with extortionists? I mean, that's wrong, isn't it? If somebody's got that job title. There's nobody in the room that does that, is there, by the way? I'm just checking. Yeah? Because if there are, we'd like a chat outside.
Well, so that's the whole thing. It's actually a very important role that all big companies have these ransomware negotiators with their incident response teams.
It is, and I understand there's a role for them. But it's interesting. You know, nobody in the history of I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years, and I've never seen any organization collect that much data on organizations. Nobody's ever known what different companies will run. You might have an idea, and now insurers do, and they understand the policies, they understand who works in them. So this massive data really is going. In effect, at some stage, an insurer will probably be able to tell you which company will have a breach. Yeah, which is a scary phenomenon if we get that far. However, the insurer might not actually be open to disclosing that.
Right.
'Cause
Or
the
are they
liability
secure
of the
enough and
insurer.
protecting it because now they have how you can break in anything? I would maintain that the systems integrators who do all these risk assessments and these ISO certifications also have as actually probably more detailed information on it.
Yeah. So the scary part about this is would you put a black box in your environment?
Right.
So
like the car insurance companies are doing.
would you allow an insurer to actually see real time what goes on in your network? And everybody in this room will probably go, no. Yeah. But it is a business decision because
Right.
at some stage, if the insurer turns around and says to your CFO, hey, we'll reduce your premium by 50% if you put this box in, then you might end up with a box that monitors you daily and is actually sitting there looking at you. I'm just pointing that out.
Right.
I think this is going in a really weird direction. And I think somehow there needs to be some form of regulation. I don't know what it looks like around exactly what insurers can and can't do within organizations.
Right. And
cybersecurity is not insurance is not cybersecurity.
Right. It's also kind of like it's liability management. And so, yeah, I agree with that. But what I would say that what we need to keep in mind is like you have the Fortune 500 and then 5 million other companies. And for the Fortune 500, none of us would want to have that black box in there. But if I'm a 99%er and my Fortune 500 partner requires me to have cyber insurance and I can't afford it unless they put a box on, then as a business decision, I'm going to put that box on because I don't even have a security person anyway and whatever. So it's always like your mileage may vary depending on where you are. Felix?
Yeah, and actually to add to that, I've actually spoken to some companies where the cyber insurance companies are saying, hey, we are going to recommend these security services for you, and if you're able to meet these check marks, then we'll go ahead and insure you. If I don't have the money, what am I going to do? I'll just take it because I don't want to pay the high amount of a premium. So it's happening.
Right. And that kind of comes to third-party risk because big companies like mine are like forcing our partners to have cyber insurance, and they got to do whatever they can to get it if they want to work with us.
So this is the double-edged sword, isn't it? This is where I sit on the fence. Today you'll read some story about some cyber insurer paying out on behalf of their client $20, $30 million to cyber criminals. Does it fund cybercrime? Yes. Does it bring new people into cybercrime? Yes. And then tomorrow I'll speak to 4 other people that are actually then increasing their cybersecurity posture because their cyber insurer is making them do it. So is it good or is it bad?
Right.
It depends on the day.
And it's also like it's the motivation of what you want to be secure and risk managing your risk. When we talk about third-party risk, no one's doing it well, right? But we talked about this 5 years ago. If we can't figure out among ourselves in the industry, the insurance companies are going to take over because they're doing exactly what you said, and we're just going to have to rely on them to say, are these people cool enough that I connect to? So, Matt, did you have anything you want to weigh in on, or move on to the next topic? No. Okay. So, I want to kind of. There was something that Tony had said before, early in his talk, about paying ransomware. And then you kind of answered your question because he had said, okay, who here would pay ransomware? And no one raised their hand. And he's like, and I'm like, and so in my head, I'm thinking, it's not my decision. Technical people don't make business decisions. There's a governance process that we define to be able to do that. But then you said that it's a business decision, which is, but still, it's like, and yes, we are one of the people in the room with the CFO and the general counsel and communications and the CEO and maybe a board person of like, hey, what do we want to do this based on business risk, et cetera, et cetera. And so that governance aspect of risk management is such an important thing. So if we are, and yes, we may have insurance that covers certain things, but did we have an attorney look at what it really covers? And is that really going to be under theft insurance as opposed to cybersecurity insurance or one of the other projects, errors and omissions, whatever? So it's like more complicated of a question, I guess is what I'm saying.
Now that's interesting. You're right. I did answer my own question. Yeah? And by the way, I've realised that it's this side of the room again that would pay the ransomware demand. I don't know why you all sit on the left-hand side, but anyway. But I think we are responsible partly for the decision. The people in this room and us as an industry are responsible because if we don't have the right cyber resilience plan and we don't put the processes in place that the business could recover quickly, and we don't test those plans and make the business confident that we could recover, then the business decision is made much simpler. Our pay. So I think we are actually all part of that decision process before the incident happens. You might not be listened to once the incident happens, because then it becomes a business risk.
Right. But then we have to go back to the Fortune 500 versus the 99% who don't do the exercises. And Jennie, we had talked about that.
Yeah, so I think for me, what is interesting is, because we're all looking at this from the security perspective, right? And when you're on the opposite side of the table, a lot of the times the folks that are in those positions, your board, your C-suite, right, they're not technical people. They don't have any idea what any of us do, right? You guys push buttons, you plug cables in, that's like the extent of it. You ask my mom and she's like, I don't know, she does stuff with computers. And so they're looking to us and our expertise, right, to determine what is the best course of action, right? Whether the money's there or not is an irrelevant decision, right? We have to understand and know our environment well enough to know, are we able to recover from this? And if the answer is no, you need to be honest and say the answer is no, right? We can figure out all the reasons how we got here later, but it's being able to recover effectively and move on from whatever that incident is. And I think that's something that, well, none of us want to take the pride hit to say, yeah, you know what, we'd pay the ransom. Well, sometimes that's your only choice, right? If there is nothing, there's no backups that you have, there's, whatever's happening that you can't work around, you have to be able to make that decision. And that's something like, from an IT perspective, nobody ever wants to be the person to put their hand up and say, yeah, sorry, we got to pay the ransom, my bad, right? And that unfortunately is a reality for a lot of companies, and especially a lot of the smaller organizations, because they just don't have the resources, they don't have the capacity, the expertise, right, to be able to implement fully and protect their environment in the way that makes sense. And I preach this in my students' classes, and basically I'm like, there's always this fine balance between the business need and the security need, right? You hired me for my security expertise, that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to preach this to you all day long, but at the end of the day, right, we have to compromise and come up with whatever that balance is between the business's actual needs and the security needs. And right, I'm going to stand there and be upset if you're not willing to give me more money for more security folks, but you also have to understand, right, there are repercussions of that. My job is to explain to you what those are and to give you the information that you need to make the best business decisions.
Yep.
And I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you. Well, and that's why it's so important to do these exercising. And so, we do quarterly exercises, from the board level all the way down to technical ones, going through these scenarios, very complex things. Who's making a decision? 4 years ago, when we did our first ransomware, it was how are you going to get the Bitcoin? Nowadays, the insurance companies or the negotiators, they're the ones who know how to do that. But 4 years ago was my CFO was who's going to do the Bitcoin? I was like, we're going to have to get it. It's you need to exercise where you're going to get it and how you're going to get it. And when I was a virtual CISO 6 years ago, I literally in DC, because I had a company that needed a bunch of Bitcoin, who has a lot of Bitcoin? High-end call girls in DC. And so we literally went, because one of my friends married to a Ukrainian woman who speaks Russian, who knows that group. And we went in and it's we got $130,000 from a woman phone to phone on the street, because that's where we could get that much Bitcoin to give to my customer so he could do the thing he needed to do.
We need to hear more about that story.
You have no idea. The place I worked for was crazy. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. But it also kind of goes, did you have something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say, this is not a new issue. So I worked for a bank in London 30 years ago.
Also, just, sorry, people in the back there having conversations, if you can go outside so the other people can listen. Thank you. Go ahead.
So I worked for a bank in London 30 years ago. We used to have a truck outside once an hour that took away backup tapes. Once an hour.
Back in the day,
30 years ago. We had a guy in the IT department who was an army guy who used to sit there and plot if a bomb went off outside this office, or if it went off outside this office up the road, how much devastation there'd be. In the underground car park 2 blocks away, we had a complete disaster recovery site. Empty desks with machines. We fired them up every week. I'm just pointing out, this is not a new issue. We should have got to grips with this by now, really.
Well, I guess it's kind of a new vector of fact that someone is bricking all of our machines, and how do we recover from that, as opposed to a bomb blowing up and losing power, losing our facility because we all work remote now. But yes, the concept of business continuity, disaster recovery, continuity of operations is not a new thing. Some different things have kind of changed about it. But one of the things, obviously, is educating the users, right? And so, Jennie, it's one of your favorite topics. And Tony, you kind of brought it up about phishing testing, right? that was you, right? To talk about phishing and measuring clicks. And what we have done is moved away from measuring click rates, but we're down to like 2% anyway, so it's gravy at that point, to measuring, as you pointed out, reported rates. We want to get our reported rate above 40 to 50%, because reported rate's like 30 to 40%, because as we all know, if someone early reports it, then we can remove it from things and it's going to be better. And so we're measuring reported rates and educating people and doing campaigns about, like, not just see something, say something, but be a little more paranoid about doing stuff and making it as easy as possible to click that report to cyber kind of thing there. So if you want to weigh in, like, your thoughts on end user tracing, because there are certain security experts out there who don't believe that it's worth it, that you don't train the users because A, you can't rely on them as your first line of defense, and B, it's just going to give you false sense of security. But this does work.
Firstly, I wish that was me that said it, but it wasn't. But I will share one thing with you. There's one of the Dutch banks reward reporting. And I love the idea of the first person to report the unique sample on the internal email address gets a box of chocolates. I love this idea.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be in the office early every morning. Yeah, just sending I just send my whole email box to them every morning. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because we have a defender of the quarter when we have people who do things like that.
I mean, same thing like you said. We actually reward the people that report because, I mean, most people don't read the emails anyway. So how are you going to get them to report it? So we would actually start by, we started by rewarding the people. And then the other part is we made it personal, where it's not that security is coming after you, but we actually started to put in specific examples that would mean real life scenarios. And then they would look at it and say, oh, wow, okay. So we had an example where someone actually pretended to be the CEO, came in, got a gift card, had them wire them $500.
I had that same story.
Yes, and it was real, and we showed that. And then the last part about this was security. We just had to actually change the mindset of the people by coming in to say, listen, we are not here to stop you. We are your customer service. Like, we're actually humans just like you are. We want to make sure that your processes run as fast as they can. So please just include me in what you are doing so I can let you go as quickly as you can. And then that narrative just started to make a lot of changes. So that's what's up.
Yeah, I think, Max, you kind of brought that up too. Customer service is important in our industry.
Yeah, and that's something I also preach in my soapbox for my class, right? Is because I'm like, before you get out and before you're in this role, right, understand that you don't want to make enemies out of your end users, right? You want customers to come to you when they accidentally click something, when they gave their password to the janitor or whatever's happening, right? I'm like, do not make them feel bad because they will never come to you again. I'm like, and it's much easier for you to clean it up when you know about it instead of somebody sweeping it under the rug. So that's something I feel like, keeping that in the back of your mind as you're going through your career, and especially as you get older and saltier and you've seen all the terrible things like the $500 gift cards, not naming the university, but we had that same thing, but it was a culture problem, right? Phishing email goes out. It's like, oh, we want $500 gift cards. But luckily for us, the brown nosers wanted to take them there personally. And I'm just like, I'm over here feeling proud of myself that we're doing a good job. And then I realized, I'm like, we are doing a terrible job. These are very smart PhD people, and they're still falling for it. And so, like, just having the conversations. I will talk about security every day of the week. I bring it up every conversation I get. I'm like, if I get a chance to get in front of you and you will listen to me for more than 30 seconds, you will hear something about it. And part of that, I think, is just keeping it in their mindset, right? Because they don't care, right? They have other things they're working on. It's my job to care. It's my job to just make you care a little bit more, and that you'll let us know if you do something wrong. And that's all I hope for.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I just, we're not going to change people. People are fundamentally who and what they are. We are not wired for that, right? We're not wired to fight back against that. And so that is where, it doesn't mean that I don't think we do the awareness, but we have to have all the compensating controls, the other pieces, because we're fighting against human nature, and we're not going to, that's not even a culture problem. That is literally in our wiring. We're not going to fix that. And so our job is to try and find these other compensating controls, human controls, right? All these other pieces that are out there. But I really agree with, we've got to get to the place where we do see the users as being on our team. Now, yeah, I get it. Occasionally you get the real scofflaw, the one who clicks it every damn time. They don't care. They don't like. That's an HR issue, right? Let's just be real. That's an HR issue. But overall, almost all of our users are just trying to do their job. And this is across anything in cybersecurity and all that. And I mean, my joke I had when I was Department of Energy is, I've got a hard enough time fighting China and Russia, literally in that case. I can't be fighting my users, right? I can't be fighting a rear guard action against my own users. I've got to have the mindset that they are on my team. They do want to go to the same place I do, but they have a job to do. And so we do have to find, right, whether it's tools, human processes, other interventions that go out of band, all those kind of things. Those are all very viable mitigations, but we're going to have those because we just had, we're a Berkshire subsidiary. They just did a phishing test across all their guys. I mean, it was the nastiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, and it went to a very targeted group of people. I was one of them. I came within milliseconds of clicking on it myself. Now, I wouldn't have put my credential in, but I nearly did. And one of my people got caught. And I'm telling you, I mean, I used to do these for a living. Like I've done the ones that we sent to like a Wall Street firm a week before Christmas, pretending to be Amazon with a fake Amazon sign.
Yep.
Hey, we got a package for you. It's held up. We can't deliver it before Christmas if you don't do X. We got like 40% of the people. Who the hell's not going to do that the week before Christmas, right? When your kid's G.I. Joe or Barbie is stuck at a place. I've seen this one was next level. Like every piece of it was so perfectly constructed. I mean, it was brutal.
And that's where like AI comes in, making it really,
yeah.
really accurate. And it's not the Nigerian 419 scams anymore. It is like very pertinent. But also that's where reporting more important than clicks because people are human. And if there's a man in the mailbox, I send you an email, your account gets compromised, you send it back with malicious attachment, of course I'm going to open it. Tony?
Well, I'm going to disagree slightly, Max. Yeah, I agree with you that all the people in this room, their behaviour won't change because unfortunately it is human behaviour. But it doesn't mean we can't stop the next generation from being like us. Why can't we teach the next generation to do this differently? Why can't we actually implement different technologies and processes where it's not the same issue? So I'm just saying that I think this is an issue that you could, but it needs to be really early on, to actually change that behaviour so that the kids don't become their parents.
Right. Training it in schools and making it more aware, we have Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, which kind of goes down into the primary schools and things like that.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. 15 years ago, the topics of Cybersecurity Awareness Month were passwords, phishing, and multi-factor authentication. Guess what they were last year?
The same. Yeah. No.
So, right.
Right. It's not changing.
Right. So if we want to change behaviour going forward, we need to change the education process somehow. I'm just saying it.
Right.
Wouldn't it be great that when you open a smartphone and some kid takes a picture of their junk, that it turns around and says, you don't want to send that to someone? But my point is the phone should be intelligent enough that it actually stops their behaviour. I mean, the technology is there.
It's called the parental lock.
Right.
But you get...
Yeah.
Right.
But you understand my point. You understand my point. Let the technology help and actually change the behavior of the kids.
So, yeah, go ahead, Felix.
So I really want to understand that. How is that? Where does that data sit?
Who owns it?
Yeah, who owns that? Exactly. That's why we still have these problems. Because, we can talk about...
It's regulation.
We don't do that well here in the States.
Exactly. We're in America. That's why we still have these problems.
You think you're free and not regulated?
That's a whole other panel. So we're going to be opening up to questions. So if you have a question queued up, go ahead and Garrett, I know that it takes 45 seconds for someone to actually go from, hey, I have a question to actually opening up. So the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is you had another thing that Tony brought up, and there was a callback for something that he said, is about tool selection and what we do for selecting tools. Now, most of my friends know that I talk to more vendors and startups than anybody, and and talk different things. And one of the things I say a lot to startups is that's like, hey, going back to Fortune 500 versus the 99% of the 5 million others, it was like what works for one doesn't work for the other. There's lots of factors into it. And while I agree with your statement about diversity is important, we talked about it as a first principle for decades of like, we can't have all, Cisco gear or Palo Alto gear because blah, 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 notwithstanding CrowdStrike. But, for the 99%, something is better than nothing, and if they have a purchasing vehicle to be able to get all in one package, then great, do that. But where I want everything individual, separate, and backing up each other.
So let me back up my statement slightly, because I wrote an article that's on dark reading, and I'd recommend going to read it, because on that particular vendor that you mentioned, they claim to have 43 of the 50 states. It was their statement. It's on their website. Now, to me, this is a federally funded grant program. Yeah. Now, if the government turned around and said, okay, there can't be any vendor that has more than 10% of the funding, so therefore you get natural diversity, it stops the issue.
Right. Among a community,
right.
I agree with that, because then like the Change Healthcare thing that was brought up, they were in 40% of the payment things, and you saw that impacted. And then NTK right afterwards with the auto insurance, and we realized like, oh crap, a lot of people are using the same thing. I agree with that point.
Right, because you could spread the diversity.
Moreover, then my company has all one type of thing. All right, questions? We have a microphone to go around if anyone wants to ask. Yes.
Hello. Hello. Hear me? My name is Adam Habib. Hope you're all doing well. I have a question for Felix. You talked about you guys have a rotational program, and you were wondering, what structure can you guys have for those rotationals to end up, getting to managing positions and, eventually C-suite. I myself am in a rotational program. It's a 3-year program. I'm in year 2, so early career. What advice would you have for rotationals trying to get up in the corporate world?
Absolutely. Well, congratulations, first off.
Thank you. Thank you.
My biggest advice would be seek the skills, not the titles. So I'll say it again. Go after the skills, not the titles, because your skills are going to separate you from everybody else. The titles will always change. It doesn't matter. You go to company A, you're an engineer. You go to company B, you're a manager. It doesn't really matter. But your skill set, that's the biggest thing. So that's what I'll say.
Thank you, Felix.
Wow. Yes. Yeah, we have a question here.
Great. So as someone who spent 15 plus years doing awareness and training and trying to help people, when it comes to human behavior, it's not something we can fix, but it's something we can mitigate against. But whenever I hear people talk about human behavior, they go, how do we fix it? And it's like it's a different mindset. I just wanted your opinion on that, because it seems like it is something that we can mitigate against. It's something we can improve, especially with metrics on like human risk factors and these type of things. So I just wanted your opinion.
Yeah, I guess it's like one of the things, like we kind of trust no one about that, and we realize that, hey, it's gravy if people behave well. But we also, like, and I think Max alluded to earlier, it's like we know who our problem children are, and we keep a close eye on them.
But I think there's part of it is just thinking about them as human beings, right? And thinking about what are our strengths and weaknesses, right? And even like think about physical security, right? Like really good physical security program, you don't have somebody stand to post 8 hours, because if you do, they are going to lose attention, and they're going to stop paying attention, right? So anybody who you go to some rinky-dinky spot somewhere, yeah, they got some guy standing post for 8 hours. He's not paying attention to anything. You could drive a truck by him, right? You rotate your people, right? So in my work, I worked with places like Secret Service, places like that. Well, typically, right, if they're doing something in a high protective situation, they're rotating post every couple hours, right? Because they know human nature is, I'm going to start to zone out, right? You start to think through, again, what people are, and you build around that, right? Versus trying to force them into whatever you think, well, this is what we need to do, so I'm just going to force them to do it. That's not going to work as well. So you do need, because there are things as human beings, I love this quote I heard years ago from this, we haven't gotten to AI, and I don't want to, but I talked to this professor in the UK. He was one of the world's experts in AI, and he had this great quote I've stolen and reused, right? He was talking about the difference between AI and people. He said AI is fast, accurate, and stupid, right? He said people are slow, sloppy, and clever, right? And he said if you understand that, you start to understand what AI is good at and what people are good at, right? We are clever, right? AI does all these cool things, but we've seen hallucinations. We've seen the silly stuff it does because it's really fast, and it can be very accurate right up until it's really stupid, right? Now, not that we're not capable of being stupid, but we tend to be just slower and sloppier. But we are incredibly clever, right, when you put us in the right position. And so that's sort of where I think about people is put people in the right position, structure it so they can succeed, and very often they will, right? And that's one of the ways I think we can approach that, right? And that's where you start to get into layers of protection.
So what I take away is like people are clever at being stupid. Anyway, who else has a question? Yeah, in the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope y'all had a great time here today. I just have a simple question. I have 0 years of experience in dealing with cybersecurity. I'm totally new to the field. Is there a magic number of projects that I would need to build a portfolio to present if I'm trying to at least secure a job interview or get an entry-level role?
So I don't think it's quantum. So I'll jump in first because the microphone's right here. So it's easy for me. And I'm excited about this topic because it feeds into another one that I talk about a lot. But I would say it's more about interest, enthusiasm, and determination. So like if you proactively go and do these things and you show enthusiasm about learning and continually learning, and you come into the community to some of these events, like you're here talking to folks, and it's like, hey, and what's your name? I'm sorry?
Oh, Jerry.
Jerry, it's like, hey, Jerry's a cool guy. It's like, hey, why don't you come talk to us about something, because it's really about, to me, personality, aptitude, capability, enthusiasm. It's like, I don't care if you went to school, what your grades were, which certification, none of that matters. It's like, are you going to show up and are you going to be able to be dependable and trustworthy to be able to do this? So that's my statement on it.
I agree, right? I can't fix a personality, but I can teach you skills. And so that's something, as soon as you can, do this type of networking, right? Put your, hat out. And then this is a lot of self-promotion, right? You have to be willing to put in the work and go around and talk to people and do the networking because that's how you're going to get your foot in the door. Unfortunately, a lot of times, right, resumes get screened. We don't get to see them. And so, when we're looking and we finally get you in front of us, right, we want to see that you're excited about what you want to do. We want to see that you want to go out and learn. I'll give you one example. I had somebody come to interview. He was on my team, and I asked him about a technical question. He didn't know the answer, and then he came back. He never followed up. He never went to look it up, and I said, I don't want you on my team. I was like, you didn't want to take the ambition. You're already on this team, just in a different department, but you don't want to take the chance to follow up. That's where, being passionate and understanding what you're excited about and being able to articulate that when you interview, that will get you way further than whatever you're going to write on a resume, right? Resumes are just words. I need to see you as a person, so be yourself, be bold, do all the things. All right.
So that was phenomenal.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm very excited about the hiring part. I want to help everyone.
Yes. One thing I want to highlight with what she said, follow up. Follow up is huge. Most of the time we connect with people and then that's it, right? We met here, that's it. Sometimes all it takes is actually just sending a message on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I met you here. It was great to meet you. And what I like to do, I like to take pictures. So we take a picture together. I send a picture so you know who I am. 3-4 months from now, when you see Jermaine become a VP, I can easily reach out and say, hey, we met here. Great to meet you. Then it's not, I know you can't talk to 300 people all the time, but at least you've set the relationship to a place where you can easily continue. That's all I'll say. So just make sure you are following up and that network is strong.
And you'll get the experience, Jerry. Glad to have you.
Well, let's test something. Is anybody in the room hiring? Because if they are, could they put their hand up? Because he needs to talk to you. Because he's enthusiastic enough to actually stand up and ask the question.
Right.
Yeah.
That
So-
take a lot of guts to say
Yeah.
that. So we applaud that. Yes, one last question here.
Would you consider hiring an IT auditor?
I don't have any auditor, but that doesn't mean I can't help get a good word in with somebody else in a different department.
I got you. I just, being an IT auditor, I'd like to maybe move into the cybersecurity
Yep.
industry if I've audited your space enough.
A lot of people transition from audit to cybersecurity. It's a similar kind of skill set. Yes.
My question was.
Oh, go ahead. Repeat the question. I'm
That's okay.
sorry.
My question was whether they would consider hiring an IT auditor that already audits cybersecurity, the cybersecurity space. And
Yeah.
knows a little. Not
Yeah,
much.
'cause- yeah.
I hear this often, but I love an auditor.
Well,
Help me be
we
a better
don't
version
hear
of
that.
myself.
Never
No,
hear that.
I say this. I literally taught this in my class last night. It's the last unit, and I said the first words out of my mouth are, "I love auditors," because everybody hears that and they're like, "Oh no, they're coming for my job." I'm like, I want you to come in here and tell me what the heck I'm doing wrong, so I can do it better and be better at everything else. And so this is your role. That's what you get paid to do. You're the expert in that. Tell me what I need to do, and I will go and do it. And I love me an auditor, so I'm
Yep.
appreciative of you.
A lot of
experts in
transfer of skills,
cybersecurity.
attention
Yeah.
to detail, determination,
Yes,
following
yes.
rules, trustworthiness, all that.
So yes,
cushy,
absolutely,
thing.
I would take an auditor
So,
that comes across my desk.
all right. Kim,
Not,
is that
maybe
us for
not
time?
the IRS. Their systems are a little outdated. I don't know if I want them on my team yet.
I do have a quick announcement.
Okay, one more announcement from Kim.
Just really quick. Felix, who do you work for again? Who's Putnam? Felix from Putnam. All the sponsors, he wants to take a photo with you since he just talked about taking photos.
Felix is good at the photos. Like all my
Felix
best speaking
just said
photos
the
came
best
from
way to get to
Felix.
know him is take us a photo with him. So Felix is right here. All right, I'll let you wrap it up.
Okay. Yep. Here we go. All right. So so you're saying go ahead and just wrap it up and close everything out and everything. Okay. Okay. So first, let me thank the panel. Everybody, thank the panel for this great active discussion. We appreciate your attention in the audience, and thank Kim and the team at FutureCon for putting on such a great event. And we have one more round of prizes this year, and Kim's going to come up and talk about what all the vendors are giving away for everybody. So who gets the screen?